In 2018, TEKASHI 6IX9INE looked almost untouchable. Rainbow hair, rainbow teeth, millions of followers, records going platinum, beefs with rappers across the country, and everywhere he went, there seemed to be a group of men standing behind him. Nine Trey Gangsta Bloods. To millions of people watching online, the combination looked perfect. TEKASHI had fame, money, and attention. Nine Trey gave his image something even more valuable: danger. But behind the Instagram videos, screaming matches, and music videos was a relationship that was becoming increasingly difficult to control. And within a matter of months, TEKASHI 6IX9INE would go from publicly representing Nine Trey to sitting inside a federal courtroom and identifying members of the gang for the government. He would describe robberies, shootings, drug activity, internal politics, his own crimes, and even his own kidnapping. By the time it was over, the rapper who built one of the loudest gangster personas in hip-hop had become one of the government's most famous cooperating witnesses. So how did that happen? How did TEKASHI 6IX9INE get so deeply involved with Nine Trey that federal prosecutors charged him as part of a racketeering conspiracy? And what finally convinced him to turn against the people who had been standing beside him? The answer starts before the federal indictment. TEKASHI 6IX9INE, whose real name is Daniel Hernandez, was already attracting attention in New York's underground rap scene. His appearance was impossible to ignore. His music was aggressive. His videos were chaotic. But then came Gummo, released in 2017. The video transformed TEKASHI almost overnight. There he was, surrounded by men dressed in red. Gang imagery everywhere. The song exploded. And suddenly, the rapper with rainbow hair had something much bigger than a viral video. He had an identity. The relationship was mutually beneficial. TEKASHI brought something Nine Trey didn't have: a rapidly growing celebrity with millions of people watching everything he did. Nine Trey brought something TEKASHI needed for the character he was selling: street credibility, protection, and intimidating presence. TEKASHI would later explain the relationship in extraordinarily simple terms during his testimony. He provided money, the gang provided credibility, and for a while it worked. His career exploded. Gummo became a massive record. Then came Kuda, Keke, Billy, Feet. TEKASHI 6IX9INE wasn't simply going viral anymore. He was becoming one of the biggest new rappers in America. But his strategy depended on constant escalation. Every argument had to become bigger. Every Instagram Live needed more people watching. Every opponent needed to be humiliated. Every controversy created another controversy, and Nine Trey was increasingly intertwined with that public persona. The problem was that the people around TEKASHI weren't actors hired for a music video. Federal prosecutors described Nine Trey as a real criminal enterprise involved in shootings, robberies, assaults, and narcotics trafficking. And eventually, the line between internet performance and real-world violence began disappearing. One of the clearest examples involved another rapper, Chief Keef. TEKASHI had been publicly feuding with people associated with Chief Keef. Then, in June 2018, someone fired at Chief Keef outside a hotel in Times Square. He wasn't hit, but federal prosecutors later established that Kentia McKenzie, known as Kuda B, had agreed to accept money from TEKASHI 6IX9INE in connection with arranging the shooting. McKenzie eventually pleaded guilty. What had started as rap beef had entered an entirely different world. This wasn't an Instagram argument anymore. It was evidence in a federal criminal case. And it wasn't the only violent incident connected to the people surrounding TEKASHI. In April 2018, a confrontation at the Barclays Center escalated into gunfire. Federal prosecutors later said a Nine Trey member fired a weapon inside the arena during a confrontation involving rivals. Again, the spectacle surrounding TEKASHI was moving away from performance. Federal investigators were building a much larger picture. But Tekashi had another problem. The relationships inside his own circle were deteriorating. Money became an issue. Control became an issue. Who actually controlled TEKASHI 6IX9INE? Was he using Nine Trey? Was Nine Trey using him? Was everybody using everybody? The answer became increasingly dangerous. Tekashi eventually fired members of his management team and publicly announced that he was separating himself from people around him. But by that point, federal investigators had already been watching. And something else had happened months earlier that would become one of the most dramatic parts of the entire case. July 22nd, 2018. TEKASHI 6IX9INE was returning from filming a music video. According to the federal case, Anthony Ellison, known as Harv, kidnapped and robbed him. TEKASHI would later describe the encounter in court. He was forced from a vehicle. He was assaulted. He was taken around the city, and his jewelry was stolen. The kidnapping was particularly significant because Ellison wasn't some random stranger. He was a high-ranking member of Nine Trey. Think about how much had changed. The same gang association that helped make Tekashi's image look dangerous was now part of the danger surrounding him. The relationship had turned inward, and prosecutors would eventually argue that the kidnapping was connected to internal Nine Trey conflict and Ellison's effort to enhance his own position. Tekashi survived, but the relationship was collapsing. Then came November 2018. Tekashi publicly announced that he had fired his team. He told people he didn't have a manager anymore. He distanced himself from people who had been surrounding him. And almost immediately, the federal government moved. On November 18, 2018, TEKASHI 6IX9INE was arrested. The next day, federal prosecutors announced charges against him and several other alleged Nine Trey members and associates. This wasn't a minor case. This was federal racketeering. The indictment described Nine Trey as a criminal enterprise whose members and associates committed shootings, robberies, assaults, and drug trafficking. Tekashi was suddenly facing the consequences of activity prosecutors said went far beyond music. The gangster image that helped propel his career had collided with a federal investigation, and now he had to make the most important decision of his life. Keep fighting alongside the people charged with him, or cooperate. Tekashi chose cooperation, and he chose it quickly. He pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges and agreed to assist prosecutors. That decision completely changed the Nine Trey case. Because the government didn't simply have another witness, they had TEKASHI 6IX9INE, a person who had spent months publicly surrounded by the defendants, a person who had traveled with them, paid people, participated in crimes, appeared in videos with them, argued with them, and according to his testimony, learned how the organization worked from the inside. If you love hip-hop stories like this, like, comment, and subscribe. There are a lot more stories coming, and some of the biggest moments in hip-hop become even crazier when you look at what actually happened in court. Because this is where Tekashi's story becomes completely different. September 2019, Anthony Ellison and Aljermiah Mack go to trial, and the government calls Daniel Hernandez. TEKASHI 6IX9INE walks into federal court as a cooperating witness. The transformation is almost impossible to exaggerate. A year earlier, he was screaming gang slogans into cameras. Now he was answering questions from federal prosecutors. He explained Nine Trey, he identified people. He described the hierarchy as he understood it. He discussed his own role. He talked about money. He talked about violence. And importantly, he didn't present himself as an innocent celebrity who had accidentally wandered into the wrong crowd. He admitted his own criminal conduct. That's part of how cooperation works. A cooperating witness can be incredibly useful, precisely because that person participated in the activity being prosecuted. But that creates an obvious weakness too. The defense can ask, why should anybody believe him? Tekashi had every reason to help prosecutors. His own sentence could depend heavily on the value of his cooperation. So Ellison and Mack's attorneys attacked his credibility. They portrayed him as a liar, a performer, someone willing to say whatever benefited him. And Tekashi's history gave them plenty to work with. This was a man who had built a career on trolling, exaggeration, provocation, creating spectacles online. Now a jury had to decide whether to believe him when the stakes were no longer views or record sales. They were years in federal prison. One of the most important parts of Tekashi's testimony concerned his kidnapping. Tekashi identified Anthony Ellison as one of the people responsible. The defense disputed the government's version and challenged whether the kidnapping was what Tekashi claimed. But prosecutors had more than Tekashi's word. They presented evidence supporting their case. And after the trial, the jury reached its decision. Anthony Ellison was convicted of racketeering conspiracy. He was also convicted in connection with Tekashi's kidnapping and assault. Aljermiah Mack was convicted of racketeering conspiracy and narcotics conspiracy. The government had won, and Tekashi's cooperation had helped them do it. Ellison would eventually receive 24 years in federal prison. Mack received 17 years. Other people associated with the Nine Trey prosecution also received substantial sentences. Cafano Jordan, better known as Shadi, pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 15 years. Jamal Jones, known as Mel Murda, received more than 11 years after pleading guilty. The organization that had once appeared behind Tekashi in videos was now being dismantled through federal prosecutions, and Tekashi had helped the government. That created one of the biggest cultural reactions hip-hop had seen in years. The word was everywhere. Snitch. For a large part of rap culture, cooperating with federal prosecutors represented the ultimate violation, and Tekashi didn't quietly disappear afterward. He did almost the opposite. He embraced the controversy. He joked about it. He argued that the people around him had betrayed him first. His position was essentially, why should I remain loyal to people who kidnapped me, robbed me, and betrayed me? Whether somebody accepts that argument is a personal judgment. But legally, his cooperation had enormous consequences. Tekashi had pleaded guilty to serious federal crimes. Without cooperation, he faced the possibility of spending a very long time in prison. Instead, prosecutors told the court that his assistance had been extraordinary. The judge still had to decide what that cooperation was worth. December 18, 2019. TEKASHI 6IX9INE appears for sentencing. By this point, everyone understands the basic situation. He committed crimes. He admitted them. He helped prosecutors. Now the court had to balance those things. Judge Paul Engelmeyer made clear that Tekashi wasn't simply an innocent victim. The judge emphasized his participation in Nine Trey's activities and the danger created by the conduct surrounding him. Cooperation didn't erase what he had done, but it mattered a lot. Tekashi was sentenced to 2 years in prison, followed by supervised release. Because he had already spent roughly 13 months in custody, the remaining time was dramatically shorter than what many people had expected when the federal case began. Then another unexpected event changed the timeline. 2020. COVID spreads through American prisons. Tekashi had asthma, and his attorneys argued that his medical condition put him at elevated risk. A judge allowed him to serve the remaining portion of his sentence in home confinement. And suddenly, less than 2 years after being arrested in a massive federal racketeering case, TEKASHI 6IX9INE was back outside the traditional prison environment. Then he returned to the internet. Almost immediately, millions of people tuned in. His first major releases after incarceration generated enormous attention. The cooperation hadn't erased his audience. If anything, curiosity made the spectacle even bigger. And that's what makes this story different from almost every other rapper gang story. Tekashi didn't simply cooperate and disappear. He cooperated and then attempted to turn the cooperation itself into part of his public persona. He leaned into being hated. He mocked critics. He treated outrage as marketing. The same instinct that built his career before the federal case was still there. Attention was attention, but something fundamental had changed. Before the arrest, Tekashi's brand depended on the idea that he was protected by dangerous people. Afterward, everybody knew exactly what happened when that relationship collapsed. He had become evidence against them, and the Nine Trey case exposed something fascinating about the original arrangement. Tekashi needed Nine Trey. But Nine Trey benefited from Tekashi too. He brought money, visibility, access, celebrity, and attention. For a brief period, both sides gained something. But those incentives couldn't hold the relationship together. Once money, ego, loyalty, and control became contested, the alliance started destroying itself. And then federal prosecutors arrived with something stronger than any social media alliance: leverage. Tekashi had information. The government wanted it. Tekashi wanted a lower sentence. The transaction was obvious. He cooperated. That's why reducing this entire story to one word, snitch, actually misses the most interesting part. The bigger story is how the relationship got that far in the first place. A young rapper discovers that controversy generates attention. Gang affiliation makes the controversy more believable. The music explodes. Money arrives. The circle grows. Real violence becomes entangled with public beef. The rapper becomes increasingly valuable. Different people fight over access and control. The relationship collapses. A kidnapping happens. Federal investigators make arrests. And suddenly everyone has to decide where their loyalty ends and self-preservation begins. TEKASHI 6IX9INE made his decision. He chose himself. And that decision helped change the outcome of one of the most famous federal gang prosecutions in modern hip-hop. If you love hip-hop stories like this, like, comment, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments what story you want next, because there are plenty of moments in hip-hop history where the courtroom version is much more complicated than the version everybody remembers. And here's the question I think makes the TEKASHI 6IX9INE story so fascinating. When exactly did the Nine Trey relationship become impossible? Was it doomed from the beginning? Was Tekashi exploiting Nine Trey for credibility? Was Nine Trey exploiting Tekashi for money and fame? Or did both sides understand exactly what they were getting from each other until success made the relationship too valuable to control? Because by the end, almost everyone paid a price. Tekashi lost his freedom and admitted serious crimes. Nine Trey members received lengthy federal sentences. Anthony Ellison was convicted over the kidnapping of the rapper who had once publicly represented the same gang. And the government received something prosecutors could never have created on their own: an insider with worldwide name recognition, willing to sit in front of a jury and explain what he knew. TEKASHI 6IX9INE spent years creating a character that looked impossible to intimidate. He challenged rappers. He mocked rivals. He surrounded himself with people whose presence made every threat seem more believable. It helped make him famous. But the closer that character moved toward reality, the more dangerous everything became. Eventually, the cameras weren't filming music videos. They were surveillance cameras. The people asking questions weren't interviewers. They were federal prosecutors. And the audience wasn't millions of Instagram followers. It was a jury. TEKASHI 6IX9INE had built his career by making people watch. In the end, the federal government made him talk.